War is filled with stories of bravery, sacrifice, and loss. But every so often, amid the chaos of fire and steel, something happens that defies logic. Something that makes even the most hardened soldiers whisper about ghosts. This is one of those stories. It begins in the bloodiest skies of Europe, during the bitter winter of 1944, with a bomber that came home all on its own. The B-17 Flying Fortress was the workhorse of the US 8th Air Force. Strong, dependable, and tough as nails, these bombers earned a reputation for bringing their crews back, even when they were shot to absolute pieces. On one freezing morning, a squadron of these steel birds lifted off from their English base, engines rumbling as they set a course for occupied Europe. Their target was a heavily defended rail yard deep inside Germany. Among them was one particular fortress, battered from earlier missions but still airworthy. Its crew, 10 young men, most of them barely out of their teens, joked nervously as they climbed aboard. They knew the odds. They knew that German flak and fighters were merciless. Somewhere over enemy territory, the bomber formation came under a brutal attack. Flak bursts tore jagged holes through wings and fuselages. Messerschmitt fighters dived in with their cannons blazing. The skies became a storm of smoke, fire, and twisting metal. In the chaos, that one fortress began to lag behind, falling out of formation. Witnesses from other planes saw it trailing smoke, one engine sputtering, another on fire. Radio contact was lost. To the rest of the squadron, it was simply gone, swallowed by the war. Days later, miles away from the front lines, Belgian troops and Allied ground crews were working at a makeshift airfield. It was a cold, quiet day when the sound of distant engines stirred the men to alertness. Anti-aircraft gunners scrambled to their positions, their eyes scanning the overcast sky. Out of the grey clouds, a lone bomber appeared. Its silhouette was unmistakable, a B-17. But something was terribly wrong. Its fuselage was shredded with holes. One of its 4 propellers was barely turning. Smoke still trailed from its side. Yet despite the catastrophic damage, the bomber flew steadily, almost gracefully, as if it were being guided by unseen hands. The gunners shouted back and forth, "Is it ours? Is it German? Hold your fire! Look at the markings!" And sure enough, painted on the tail was the white star of the US Army Air Forces. The men lowered their guns and watched in stunned silence. The flying fortress circled the airfield once, as if surveying the ground. Then its landing gear lowered into position, and it aligned perfectly with the runway. Engines roaring, it came down in a textbook approach. The wheels screeched as they hit the tarmac, rubber smoke curling into the air. The bomber rolled forward, slowed, and came to a complete stop. Not a single misstep, not a single error. It was a flawless landing. Soldiers and mechanics rushed toward the aircraft. They expected to see wounded men stumble out, perhaps carried on stretchers, groaning in pain. But the closer they got, the stranger the scene became. No hatches opened, no figures moved inside. The engines just droned on, as though they were waiting for a command that would never come. Finally, a sergeant cautiously climbed the ladder and peered into the cockpit. What he found froze him in place. The pilot's seat was empty. The co-pilot's seat, empty. The navigator, bombardier, radio operator. Every single position was vacant. 10 seats, all unoccupied. But there were signs of life, or rather terrifying signs of its violent end. The pilot's seat was smeared with dark stains, unmistakably blood. The control yoke, locked in the landing position, was sticky to the touch. This fortress, it had flown itself home. Confusion swept the base. Had the crew bailed out? A search was launched, but radar had reported no parachutes. No distress calls had ever been logged. Intelligence officers quickly checked the records. The bomber's serial number matched one reported missing days earlier. Its entire crew was presumed dead. And yet, here was their aircraft, parked neatly on a Belgian runway. How could it have flown so smoothly? How did it manage to land so perfectly, without a living hand at the controls? The mechanics swore the damage was far too severe for any autopilot system of the era. Experienced pilots insisted that no machine could make such a clean descent under those conditions, especially not in its damaged state. The only conclusion left was the one being whispered in the mess halls, a conclusion that few dared to say aloud. The crew brought her home, even after they were gone. Word of the ghost bomber spread like wildfire through the Allied bases. Men started talking. Some swore they had seen eerie shadows moving in the cockpit windows as the plane came down. Others claimed they heard ghostly voices crackle faintly over the radio during its final approach, even though no official transmissions were ever recorded. One British gunner later swore he had seen figures in the nose of the plane, transparent, glowing faintly, as if they were guiding it down. True or not, the story took on a life of its own. The flying fortress was treated with a kind of reverence. Mechanics refused to strip it for spare parts. Pilots would walk up and touch its battered fuselage before their own missions, calling it a good omen. Of course, there were attempts at rational explanations. Some suggested the crew had bailed out too far away to be seen, though not a single survivor was ever found. Others argued the autopilot might have engaged accidentally after the crew was gone. But even seasoned aviators shook their heads. An autopilot could keep a plane level, sure, but it couldn't lower the landing gear, line up with a runway, and bring a crippled, half-burning bomber down with such impossible precision. And those bloodstains in the cockpit, they told a different, darker story. Someone had been there. Someone had fought to the very end. For months afterward, strange sightings were reported. Pilots on dangerous bombing runs swore they sometimes saw a lone, silent B-17 circling above them on missions. It never joined their formation. It just drifted alongside them in the clouds, like a guardian angel. They called it the Phantom Fortress. Some said it was the spirits of the lost crew, still flying eternal missions in the skies over Europe. Others believed it was the plane itself, a machine so bonded to its men that it refused to die until it had finished its final mission, coming home. After the war, the official records kept the event brief and clinical. A B-17 landed in Belgium, crew unaccounted for, circumstances unknown. But among the veterans who were there and the generations who heard the tale, the story lived on. Even in war, where death is an everyday visitor, there are mysteries that can't be explained by bullet holes and bomb damage. The self-landing B-17 was one of them. Was it just incredible luck? A one-in-a-billion accident of machinery? Or was it something far stranger? The unbreakable will of 10 young men refusing to leave their fortress behind, even after drawing their last breath. No one knows for sure. But what is known is this. One winter's day in 1944, a battered flying fortress returned from the grave, flown perhaps by the ghosts of its crew. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, please hit that like button and subscribe for more mysteries from history. We'll see you in the next one.